Okay, hi everyone. Today I have a very special guest, a colleague that I've known for a number of years. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Brian Murray. I'm going to ask him to introduce himself before we get into some of the questions that some of you had raised.
Hi, I'm Brian Murray, and I'm the head of neurology at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center. I'm an associate professor at the University of Toronto, and I met Dr. Ju 30 years ago when we worked in a similar lab. I had chosen that lab because I was interested in psychiatry. The mentor we had was appointed in psychiatry. Anyway, he didn't do any psychiatry. He had me slice rat brains, and I learned a lot of neuroanatomy and neuroscience and became very interested in that. From there, I became very interested in some of the problems of psychiatry, use of neurology, and the tools included imaging and EEG and those sorts of devices. And so that's how my career turned to sleep, because sleep was a very simple behavior that you could measure and quantify and do science with. So that's how my career evolved.
Okay, that sounds really great. I had not realized, but that's pretty awesome.
So the term sleep hygiene sounds kind of gross to me. So I don't know. I cringe a little bit every time I hear it. I often refer to good sleep habits, but sometimes I slip and I call it sleep hygiene as well. Sleep is a behavior, and we can do things to improve those behaviors. And the body likes routine. Millions of years of evolution have caused organisms to orient to the sun and go to sleep. So why shouldn't it apply to everyone, every organism, humans? People fool themselves when they disregard those rules, and it has consequences. I think sleep is very important for the brain, and the behaviors we can do to enhance sleep help the brain. So it's definitely worth doing. In general, there are many books or websites you can look at. National Sleep Foundation has lots of suggestions. There's lots of books and simple tips. But the most important things are to get an adequate amount of sleep. Roughly 7 to 9 hours of sleep for most people. Although there are some that get less and some that get more. Trying to keep a regular sleep time. The body, again, likes routine. So learning those patterns helps facilitate sleep onset and alertness at appropriate times. Being mindful of substance use and how that interacts or affects sleep is important. Alcohol, for example, fools people. They fall asleep faster, but the sleep that follows is more disrupted. Caffeine can certainly help with alertness in the day, but it's not liquid sleep. It's not a replacement. So people need to make sure that they don't have too much caffeine because it disrupts night sleep, and then you get into a bit of a vicious circle. Certainly keeping caffeine away from the late afternoon or evening is particularly helpful. Exercise in the morning, important, because that's when your natural cortisol rises. So if you exercise and have fight or flight response before bed, that's obviously going to interfere with sleep onset. So exercise is good, preferably earlier in the day. Most people need to have a comfortable sleep environment, not too warm. People sleep a little better when it's just a little cool, not too cold, not Canada cold, but a little cool. You certainly want to block out extraneous societal inventions. Certainly noise can disrupt sleep. Even using like tablet devices to read before bed is problematic, because the light from the device sends a signal to the brain through the retinal hypothalamic tract to wake up. And so you send a false signal if you do that. So I encourage people to try and read paper books before bed and try and turn the electronics away, or at least at a distance as best possible prior to bed. Not spending too much time in bed as well. Like most people need 7 to 9 hours of sleep, the vast majority. And so if you're spending 12 hours in bed, you're going to have 3 hours where you're not sleeping. So don't do that. Get a hobby, get out of bed, exercise, Use the bed for sleep and adult games only. Otherwise, you condition yourselves to not sleep. For example, doing your coursework in bed, not a great idea because you kind of condition yourself to be anxious sometimes about it, and then that interferes with sleep onset. So it's better to have that in a separate area, study elsewhere, and use your bed for sleep.
Okay, some great advice. Thanks so much for that.
I think the important thing is to protect your sleep as best possible. Try and get that time. Napping counts. That adds into the total. So if you're able to grab a nap in the afternoon, that adds into whatever you had at night. So that's fine. If people are trying to consolidate their night sleep, we generally advise that they avoid naps, but it's better to have that sleep and to have it in a chunk if necessary. Certainly, when I was a student, I burned the candle at both ends, and then you get sleep deprived. Your ability to focus and concentrate and learn is not as good, and so it is less efficient cognitively to be sleep deprived and try and acquire material. So staying up all night to study may not be as efficient as getting a proper night's sleep and then actually being in the library and reading efficiently. Certainly when people are sleep deprived, if they've been up, then to read the next day, people will kind of read the same paragraph over and over, nothing's going in. And so it creates problems. There's certainly, periods where you're extra vulnerable. So, the mid-afternoon, just a circadian rhythm, a time of day effect makes it harder to focus at that point. So if that's where you have to get your nap, then that might be a good place to do it. Save your intense studying for the morning when you're as rested as possible. I think if I had to do undergrad over again, I would have slept more. I think I would have learned more efficiently, and been in a better mood, because the major effect of sleep loss in psychological studies, the number one effect is actually impaired mood. So people pay the price by being sleep deprived. It's a stress on the body. We don't allow bodies to go without water or food. So why would we let it go without a basic biological function like sleep? It's obviously there for a reason.
That's a great point and a really great perspective.
There's a big Venn diagram of sleepiness and mood problems, and there's a lot of people in the middle. So, you look at the one thing that you can control to take that out of the equation. Certainly getting more sleep will help your mood, and it's a very important feature. A lot of sleep disorders that I see cause impairments in mood, and when we treat the sleep disorder, people feel better and their mood's better. Feeling tired, run down, low energy, well, that could be sleepiness. Could be depression. Could be a bit of both. But certainly there's a component under your control that you can help fix. So it's important to try and protect your sleep time and get rested. It makes a big difference in terms of outlook on life. The amount of sleep remains relatively constant across adult life. The amount of dreaming sleep, the amount of deep sleep is relatively constant, contrary to expectations or what many people think in healthy people. As people get older, they may acquire medical problems. They may have pain that interferes with sleep. They may get put on medications that interfere with sleep. They may develop sleep disorders that interfere with sleep. So all of these things can add up. But I have 90-year-olds who come into the sleep lab and get 7.39 hours of sleep and 20% REM and 20% slow wave, and they're healthy. So I think sleep remains relatively constant across adult life, healthy adult life. There are changes, but they're much milder than people would expect. So some of them, for example, like in the elderly, we think, they may sleep less, but actually maybe the pattern of sleeping changes a bit because they don't have school or work. They may nap more in the afternoon. That's actually part of the total sleep time. So it could be the same amount. But the structure of sleep, surprisingly, we looked at this in large samples all over the world, and it is much more constant than we had thought. There are subtle changes. There's a gradual drop in the amount of REM or slow wave over time, but it's not as dramatic as you might think. And certainly in healthy normal people, it remains fairly constant.
Yeah, I think a lot of students would be surprised to hear that, because I think the perception is that sleep does change as we get older, but really interesting perspective on that.
So there's a literature on the effects of emotional regulation and sleep, and certainly, people have a real interest in ascribing a purpose to sleep, trying to figure out what it's there for. I think probably the best argument for what sleep is for is in our colleague Dr. Richard Horner's book on sleep. He takes an evolutionary biology perspective, and it makes a lot of sense. Organisms have had millions of years to orient to the sun to improve their chance of finding food and reproducing. And so it's important for that activity to occur to optimize that organism for function the next day. So learning that occurs, for example, makes the organism better able to function the next day. In humans, we can do things like practice a motor skill, and you practice, you get a bit better, but you sleep and you get way better. And so there's something that occurs in the brain. And we've learned in the last 20 years a couple remarkable things. One is that we have a number of synaptic connections that develop over time, but our brain has limited space and energy. And so something has to give. And that give occurs in sleep. So a lot of connections are depotentiated. And so this makes the relatively important things strengthened, whereas the junk gets kind of washed away. Similarly, on that point, we've also learned that there's a potential space that develops in the brain between the glia and the blood vessels that opens up, and it actually takes out the trash. So a lot of misfolded protein junk gets cleared in sleep, the so-called glymphatic space. There's some very interesting work being done on that to figure out how we actually take out the trash at night and help make our brain work better. This obviously has important implications for later development of neurodegenerative type conditions. So my advice to students is advice I wish I had when I was a student in that position. And that is that sleep is important, and you really want to protect it as best possible. The nights spent, pulling an all-nighter, staying up to try and cram that information in, it's not as good as if you had regular sleep-wake time of adequate duration. You'll feel better. Your mood will be better. Your outlook on your studies and life will be better, and it'll help you cope and get through the work that you have to do. If you're rested and alert, you study much more efficiently, and you can learn in a useful way. And you spend less time rereading things or going back over stuff or not absorbing the material. I really wish students would know that. Learn that one the hard way.
Okay, great advice, and always great catching up with you. I'm just going to say you look exactly the same. I wish I looked exactly the same as I did 30 years ago, but again, really great catching up with you. Thanks for both the information as well as the insight on sleep.
It was great talking with you. Thanks.